The official story is simple. Elvis Presley died on August 16th, 1977. He was found in his bathroom at Graceland. The cause was a heart attack. He was 42 years old. But is that the whole story? Millions of people don't think so. In the year after his death, the National Enquirer was filled with stories of sightings. By 1988, a survey found that 1 in 10 Americans believed Elvis was still alive. That's over 20 million people at the time. The sightings have never stopped. They happen in supermarkets, at gas stations, in small towns, and big cities. They are a part of our culture. A joke, maybe, but also something more. Why can't we let him go? Why do we see his face in the crowd? Thing is it just wishful thinking? Or is there something more to it? We are told to trust the official reports, the death certificate, the funeral, the body in the casket. But questions linger. There are questions about the body's weight, the misspelled name on his tombstone, and his strange behavior in the days before he died. Maybe the story isn't so simple after all. Maybe, just maybe, he pulled off the greatest disappearing act in history. Here are 17 stories, clues, and theories that might make you wonder. They might even make you a believer. Number 17 was Elvis, an extra in a Christmas movie. It's a strange place to start. A family Christmas movie from 1990. The film is Home Alone. You know the one. A young Macaulay Culkin defends his house from burglars. The theory centers on a single scene. Catherine O'Hara, playing the mom, is desperately trying to get a flight back to Chicago. She's at the Scranton Airport ticket counter, pleading with the agent. Behind her, over her left shoulder, stands a man. He's bearded, wearing a turtleneck and a sports coat. He looks impatient. He leans in, trying to hear what's happening. And for a few seconds, he looks directly at the camera. Believers say that man is Elvis Presley. They argue the case with surprising detail. The man has the same eye shape, the same facial structure. He moves with a certain swagger, a familiar tilt of the head. In 1990, Elvis would have been 50, 5 years old. The man in the background looks about right for that age. The theory caught fire on internet forums in the early 2000s. People made videos. They compared screenshots of the man with photos of Elvis from the 1970s. The resemblance, they claimed, was uncanny. It was him, hiding in plain sight, enjoying a quiet life, occasionally taking work as a movie extra for fun. The director of Home Alone, Chris Columbus, has been asked about this many times. In 2015, for the film's 25th anniversary, he addressed it again. He said the man was an extra named Gary Grott. He had worked with Grott on another film. He found the theory funny, but completely untrue. He even said he had Grott on set for that specific scene. Case closed, right? Not for everyone. Believers argue that Gary Grott is a perfect alias. They point out that Grott has no other major film credits. He's a ghost, a name created to cover up the truth. They say Chris Columbus is in on the secret. Well, part of a conspiracy to protect Elvis's privacy. The theory taps into a powerful idea. The idea that Elvis is not just alive, but that he's among us, living a normal life. He got tired of the fame, the pressure, the isolation, so he walked away. And now he's just a guy standing in line at the airport. A face in the crowd. It's a comforting thought. It takes the tragic figure of Elvis in his final years and gives him a happy ending. He escaped. He won. The Home Alone sighting is a modern myth, born from a blurry video frame and a desire to believe. It shows how easily we can find patterns where none exist. Our brains are wired to see faces, especially familiar ones. This is a psychological phenomenon called pareidolia. It's why we see a man in the moon, or Jesus in a piece of toast, or Elvis in a Christmas movie. But what if it's not just a trick of the mind? What if the official story, the one about a local extra, is the real cover-up? Why would a director remember the name of a background actor from a single scene filmed decades ago? Like, is his memory really that good? And if this man wasn't Elvis, where is Gary Grott today? Why has he never come forward to put the rumors to rest and claim his 15 minutes of fame? Number 16, who was the man in the pool house photo? A few weeks after Elvis died, his family opened Graceland to a single photographer. He was from the National Enquirer. His job was to take the last photos of Elvis in his casket. The family wanted to stop unauthorized pictures from circulating. One of those photos became world famous. It showed Elvis lying in his coffin. But another lesser-known photo from that day has fueled conspiracy theories for decades. It was taken by a cousin of Elvis, a man named Billy Mann. It's a picture of the grounds of Graceland. In the background, through an open door, you can see into the pool house. And sitting inside, there appears to be a man who looks a lot like Elvis. The photo is grainy. It's not a clear shot. But the shape of the man is there. The dark hair, the profile. He's sitting in a chair, looking away from the camera. For believers, this is a bombshell. This is proof. They say Elvis faked his death and was hiding out at his own home, watching his own funeral proceedings from a distance. He was there the whole time. The photo was published in 1982 in a book called The Elvis Files by Gail Brewer Giorgio. She was one of the first and most influential authors to argue that Elvis was still alive. This picture became a cornerstone of her argument. The official explanation is simple. The man in the photo is not Elvis. It's Al Strada, a friend and employee of Elvis. Or it could be Joe Esposito, his road manager. Several people were on the grounds that day. They were grieving. They were dealing with the logistics of the funeral. It makes sense that someone would be sitting in the pool house, taking a moment away from the chaos. Photo analysts have looked at the image. They say the quality is too poor to make a positive identification. The man's features are obscured by shadows and the low resolution of the film. It could be anyone. But the believers are not convinced. They argue the man's build and posture are identical to Elvis's. They ask why someone would be sitting calmly in the pool house during such a somber event. They suggest the photo was an accidental leak, a mistake made by a family member that revealed the truth. It plays into the idea that the conspiracy was an inside job known only to Elvis's closest circle. This theory doesn't require a massive government plot, it just requires the loyalty of a few friends and family members. A loyalty that would allow Elvis to escape the prison of his own fame. The pool house photo is powerful because it's so tantalizing. It's almost clear, but not quite. It offers a glimpse of something that could change everything. It forces you to question what you see. Are you seeing a grieving friend, or are you seeing a man who has just pulled off the ultimate escape? It preys on the idea that the truth is often hidden in the background, in the blurry details that most people overlook. It makes you a detective, piecing together clues from a single haunting image. But why would he take such a risk? If you had successfully faked your own death, would you sit where a photographer might accidentally catch you on film? Is it a sign of arrogance, a clue left on purpose, or is the simplest explanation the most likely one that it's just a blurry photo of a man who is not Elvis Presley? What does a ghost in a machine look like, and how do we know it when we see it? Number 15. Did a man named Orion take over Elvis's voice? In 1978, a year after Elvis died, a mysterious singer appeared. He called himself Orion. He wore a mask, a sparkly Lone Ranger-style mask that covered his eyes. He performed on stage. He released albums, and he sounded exactly like Elvis, not like an impersonator. Exactly like Elvis. His voice had the same power, the same tone, the same unique vibrato. The album covers were cryptic. One was called Reborn. The artwork showed a masked man rising from a coffin. The record label was Sun Records, the same label that discovered Elvis Presley in the 1950s. The story was that Orion was an unknown singer who just happened to sound like Elvis. The mask was a gimmick, a way to create a mystique, but fans didn't buy it. They believed Orion was Elvis. They thought he had faked his death and was now returning to his music, but in disguise. He couldn't show his face, but he couldn't stay silent either. The music was too much a part of him. The whole thing was masterminded by Shelby Singleton, a record producer who had bought Sun Records in 1969. He saw an opportunity, he fueled the mystery, he never confirmed or denied that Orion was Elvis. He just let the rumors fly. Orion's real name was Jimmy Ellis. He was an orphan from Alabama. He had a naturally amazing voice that just happened to be a near-perfect match for Elvis's. He had tried to make it as a singer for years, but he was always told he sounded too much like Presley. It was a curse. After Elvis died, his curse became his ticket to fame. The Orion persona was based on a 1972 book by Gail Brewer Giorgio called Orion. The book was about a rock star who fakes his own death to escape the pressures of fame. The fictional star's name was Orion. Singleton took the concept and applied it to Jimmy Ellis. For a few years, the mystery worked. Orion had a cult following. People went to his shows, convinced they were in the presence of the king. They would scream, "We know it's you, Elvis," between songs. Jimmy Ellis played the part. He was cagey in interviews. He never showed his face. But eventually, the gimmick wore thin. In 1983, Elvis took off the mask on stage. He was tired of living in someone else's shadow, even if that shadow was a mask. He wanted to be known as Jimmy Ellis, but without the mask, the magic was gone. And he was just a guy who sounded like Elvis. His career faded. Tragically, Jimmy Ellis was murdered in 1998 during a robbery at his pawn shop in Alabama. The Orion story is a fascinating look at how myths are made. It was a deliberate creation, a piece of marketing genius by Shelby Singleton. He exploited the grief and wishful thinking of Elvis fans. He gave them what they wanted: a ghost, a voice from the grave. The story was documented in a 2015 film called Orion, the Man Who Would Be King. It shows how Jimmy Ellis was both a beneficiary and a victim of his own talent. He was trapped by his voice, first by being told he sounded too much like Elvis, and then by having to pretend he might actually be Elvis. But could there be more to it? Is it possible that Jimmy Ellis' story is a double bluff? A cover story for the real thing? Some believers still think so. They argue that the unmasking was staged, that the man who took off the mask was not the same man who was singing. They believe the real Elvis continued to record under different names. What if the voice was too perfect? Is it possible for two people to have such identical vocal cords naturally? Or was the most obvious, most unbelievable answer the true one all along? Number 14, what was in the black helicopter at the funeral? The funeral of Elvis Presley was a huge event. It took place at Graceland on August 18, 1977. Thousands of fans lined the streets. The procession of white Cadillacs was a mile long. The media was everywhere. It was a spectacle of public mourning. But some people noticed something strange. A black helicopter was seen hovering near the cemetery during the burial. It was not a police helicopter. It was not a news helicopter. It was unmarked. It landed briefly in a field nearby, then took off and disappeared. This detail was first brought to public attention by Gail Brewer Giorgio in her book Is Elvis Alive? She interviewed people who were there that day. They claimed to have seen the helicopter. They said it seemed out of place, secretive. For believers, this is a key piece of the puzzle. They theorized that Elvis was not in the casket. The casket was either empty or contained a wax dummy. The real Elvis was whisked away by this black helicopter. He was taken to a secure location, perhaps an airport, where he could begin his new life. Who would arrange such a thing? The theories vary. Some say it was a secret government agency. The story goes that Elvis had been working as an undercover agent for the FBI or the DEA. In 1970, Elvis famously met with President Richard Nixon at the White House. He offered his services to help fight the war on drugs. Believers claim this was not just a celebrity photo op. It was the beginning of his undercover work. By 1977, his cover was blown, where he had gathered enough information to bring down a major crime syndicate called the Fraternity. Faking his death was the only way to protect himself and enter a form of witness protection. The black helicopter was his government extraction team. Skeptics dismiss the entire story. There is no official record of an unidentified helicopter at the funeral. The memories of eyewitnesses can be unreliable, especially during a traumatic and chaotic event. It could have been a private helicopter or a news helicopter from a station that didn't want to be identified. The story about Elvis being a secret agent is also seen as a fantasy. While he did meet with Nixon and receive an honorary badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, there is no evidence he ever worked as an operative. The FBI files on Elvis, released under the Freedom of Information Act, show he was a subject of their attention, not an agent. They were mostly concerned with security threats against him, but the image of the black helicopter is powerful. It taps into a deep vein of American paranoia. The idea of shadowy government forces and secret operations has been a part of the culture since the JFK assassination and Watergate. It changes the narrative of Elvis's death. He is no longer a victim of his own excesses, a man who died sadly and too young. Instead, he becomes a hero, a patriot who sacrificed his identity for his country. It's a much more satisfying story. It gives his death a noble purpose. So what really happened that day? Was there a helicopter at all? If so, who was in it and what was its purpose? If Elvis was really a government agent, where are the records? Why has no one from the government ever come forward, even decades later, to confirm the story? Or is the absence of evidence the real evidence of a perfectly executed secret operation? Number 13. Why was his name spelled wrong on the tombstone? This is one of the oldest and most persistent clues cited by believers. Go to Graceland. At the meditation garden where Elvis is buried. Look at his tombstone. His full name is engraved there, Elvis Aaron Presley. But there's a problem. Elvis's middle name was not Aaron, it was Aaron with one A. You can see it on his birth certificate. He was named after his father, Vernon Elvis Presley, and a friend, Aaron Kennedy. But Elvis's twin brother, who was stillborn, was named Jesse Garon Presley. The family seemed to use both spellings. Throughout his life, Elvis used the spelling Aaron. It was on his driver's license, his army records, his personal stationery. He signed autographs, Elvis Aaron Presley. So why does his final resting place have a different spelling? For believers, the answer is simple. It's a deliberate mistake, a signal to those in the know. You don't misspell the name on a man's grave, especially not a man as famous as Elvis. The theory is that Elvis himself arranged it. By putting the wrong name on the tombstone, he was symbolically stating that the person buried there was not him. It was a legal loophole, a way of saying Elvis Aaron Presley is not dead. Elvis Aaron Presley is. It was his final clever wink to the world. The official explanation from the Presley family is quite different. They say that Elvis had always wanted to change the spelling of his middle name to the more traditional biblical Aaron. He had talked about it with his father, Vernon, in the years before his death. After Elvis died, Vernon Presley made the decision to use the Aaron spelling on the tombstone. He felt it was what his son would have wanted. He saw it as a final tribute, a way to honor his son's wishes. It was a personal family decision, not a secret code, but believers find this explanation too convenient. They point out that Vernon himself had the middle name Elvis, and he never tried to change its spelling. Why would this one detail be so important? They also argue that if Elvis really wanted to change his name, he could have done so legally at any time. He never did. The name Orion was the one he used his entire life. To change it only after his death seems suspicious. It feels like an after-the-fact justification for a strange anomaly. The misspelled name is a powerful piece of evidence because it's a physical fact. You can go to Graceland and see it with your own eyes. It's not a blurry photo or a third-hand story. It's a piece of granite with letters carved into it, and those letters are technically wrong. It represents a crack in the official story, a small detail that doesn't quite add up. And in the world of conspiracy theories, small details are everything. They are the threads you pull on until the whole narrative unravels. It allows people to feel smarter than the official sources, to see a truth that everyone else has missed. Is it really just a family's personal choice, a final act of love? Or is it the most audacious clue of all, left by a man who planned his own disappearance down to the last letter? Why would a father, in his moment of deepest grief, be concerned with the spelling of a middle name? And if it was Elvis's wish, why is there no other record of it, no document, no interview where he mentioned this desire? Number 12, did a small-town preacher uncover the truth in Missouri? In the late 1980s, a Baptist preacher from Benton, Missouri, became one of the central figures in the Elvis is Alive movement. His name was Bill Beanie. He was a lifelong Elvis fan. He didn't believe the official story of his death. So he decided to investigate it himself. He spent years gathering evidence. He collected documents, conducted interviews, and followed up on sighting reports. In 1990, he opened the Elvis is Alive Museum in a small building behind his house. It became a pilgrimage site for believers from all over the world. Beanie's theory was complex. He believed Elvis went into the Federal Witness Protection Program. He laid out his case with a series of documents he claimed were proof. One was a copy of the official death certificate. Beanie pointed out that the certificate was signed 2 months after Elvis died, which he found suspicious. He also claimed the certificate listed Elvis's weight as 170 pounds. Beanie and many others argue that Elvis was closer to 250 pounds in his final days. This discrepancy, he said, proved the body was not Elvis's. Beanie's most famous piece of evidence was a cassette tape. He claimed it was a recording of a phone call made by Elvis in 1981, 4 years after he supposedly died. On the tape, a man with a voice very similar to Elvis's discusses his life in hiding. He talks about his love for his fans, his reasons for disappearing, and his hopes for the future. Beanie had the tape analyzed by a voice expert in Texas, who concluded there was a high probability it was genuine. The tape was sold at the museum and became a key part of the mythology. The museum itself was a collection of these clues. There were photos of supposed sightings. There were documents with highlighted inconsistencies. There was a replica of Elvis's tombstone with the wrong middle name. Beanie even had a white casket, similar to the one Elvis was buried in, which he would use to demonstrate his theory that the original casket was too heavy because it contained an air conditioning unit to keep a wax dummy from melting. He was a showman, but he was also a true believer. He offered a $3 million reward to anyone who could find Elvis. Skeptics and mainstream journalists viewed Beanie as a curiosity, a harmless eccentric. They pointed out the flaws in his evidence. The delay in signing the death certificate is not unusual in complex cases. The weight on the certificate was likely an estimate. The voice on the tape could easily be a talented impersonator. But for thousands of followers, Bill Beanie was a truth teller. He was a grassroots investigator, an ordinary man taking on the official story. He died in 2013, but his museum and his theories live on. The story of Bill Beanie shows how these beliefs take root in communities. It's not just an internet phenomenon, it's about people coming together, sharing stories, and building a collective belief system. Beanie provided a physical space for this community. His museum was a church for the unconvinced. It gave legitimacy to their doubts and offered a coherent, alternative narrative to the one they were given by the media. But who was the man on the tape? Was he just a clever impersonator looking for attention, or did Bill Beanie really have a conversation with a ghost? Why would a preacher dedicate his life to this cause if he didn't believe it with all his heart? And does the sincerity of a belief make it any more likely to be true? Word number 11. Why was the body in the casket? Not a perfect match. The last public image of Elvis Presley is the photo of him in his coffin. It was on the cover of the National Enquirer. Millions of people saw it, and for many, something seemed wrong. The face in the casket didn't look quite right. The nose looked different, more putty-like. One of his sideburns seemed to be loose, as if it were glued on. The hands looked smooth and waxy, not like the hands of a man who practiced karate for years. The body just looked off. This led to one of the most enduring theories: the body in the casket was not Elvis. It was a wax dummy, carefully crafted to look like him. Believers argue that Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, commissioned the dummy. The real Elvis was already on his way to a new life. This would explain the inconsistencies in the body's appearance. It would also explain the heavy security around the casket. The funeral was a closed casket service for the public, but the family had a private viewing. Believers say this was to prevent anyone from looking too closely. The weight issue is also a key part of this theory. And Dr. George Nicopolis, Elvis's personal physician, stated that Elvis weighed around 250 pounds at the time of his death. The death certificate listed his weight at 170 pounds. That's an 80-pound difference. How could there be such a huge mistake? A wax dummy, however, could be made to any weight. The official explanation for the weight discrepancy is that it was a clerical error, or an estimate. But for believers, it's a glaring clue. They also point to the behavior of the pallbearers. The copper coffin Elvis was supposedly buried in weighed over 900 pounds, yet the pallbearers seemed to carry it with relative ease. This led to the theory that the coffin was not as heavy as it should have been. Bill Beanie, the Missouri preacher, famously claimed the coffin was so heavy because it contained a hidden air conditioning unit to keep the wax dummy from melting in the August heat of Memphis. Skeptics argue that people's appearances change after death. The process of embalming can alter facial features. The lighting in the room, the angle of the photo, and the emotional state of the viewer can all affect perception. A person in grief is not a reliable observer. The sideburn issue could be a shadow or a flaw in the photo's printing. The weight on the death certificate is likely just a mistake. There is no hard evidence that a wax dummy was ever created or used. But the seed of doubt was planted. The photograph gave people a chance to be their own forensic experts. They could study the image, compare it to old photos of Elvis, and draw their own conclusions. It empowered them to question the official story. The idea of a wax body is dramatic and cinematic. It feels like something out of a spy movie. It's a more interesting story than a simple tragic death. It suggests a plan, a clever deception, rather than a sad end. But could such a deception really be pulled off? Really fool a man's own family during a private viewing? How do you create a lifelike replica of the most famous man in the world without anyone finding out? And if it was a dummy, where did they get it, and what happened to the real body of Elvis Aaron Presley? Number 10. Was he a black belt hiding in a family photo? In the late 1990s, a new photograph emerged that sent shockwaves through the community of Elvis believers. It was a picture of Muhammad Ali's entourage. The photo was taken in 1984. Standing in the background is a man with white hair, a white beard, and sunglasses. He bears a striking resemblance to an older Elvis Presley, but the real clue for believers was the man's right hand. He is holding it up in a distinctive way. It is the pose of a karate master. Specifically, a practitioner of Kenpo karate. Elvis was a dedicated martial artist. He started training in the army in 1958. He earned his first degree black belt in 1960. He continued to train and teach for the rest of his life. By 1974, he was an 8th degree black belt in Kenpo. Karate was not just a hobby for him, it was a spiritual discipline. He saw it as a way to control his mind and body. And Elvis and Muhammad Ali were friends. They admired each other. They met several times. Ali even gave Elvis a pair of boxing gloves with the inscription, "You're the greatest." So the theory goes, the man in the photo is Elvis. He is alive and well in 1984, 7 years after his supposed death. He is traveling with his friend Muhammad Ali, perhaps as a spiritual advisor or a bodyguard. He has disguised himself with white hair and a beard, but his true identity is revealed by his hands. The specific hand gesture is a Kenpo sign, a signal to those who would know what to look for. It's another wink to his fans, a secret message hidden in plain sight. The photo was promoted heavily by believers. It was analyzed and debated on websites and in newsletters. They compared the man's facial features to photos of Elvis. They claimed the jawline, the nose, and the shape of the ears were a perfect match. The karate connection was the key. It was a detail so specific to Elvis that it couldn't be a coincidence. The rational explanation is, of course, that the man is simply someone else. He's a member of Ali's large and diverse entourage. The world is full of people who happen to look like older versions of famous celebrities. The hand gesture could be a coincidence, or it could be that this man was also a martial artist. There were many people in Ali's circle who were. There is no independent confirmation of who the man is. He has never been definitively identified, and that lack of identification is what keeps the theory alive. This sighting is different from many others because it connects Elvis to another cultural icon. It places him back in the world of the rich and famous, just in a hidden role. It suggests he didn't just retire to a quiet life in a small town. He was still involved, still active, still close to the world he had supposedly left behind. It paints a picture of a man in control, a man who chose his new life rather than having it forced upon him. The karate stance is a symbol of that control and discipline. But is it plausible that Elvis could hide within the most famous boxer's entourage without being recognized by anyone? Wouldn't someone in the press or in Ali's own camp have noticed and leaked the story? Or was the loyalty to Ali and Elvis so strong that the secret was kept for decades? And who is the man in the photograph, if not the king of rock and roll? Number 9. What did his last conversation really mean? In the days and weeks before August 16, 1977, Elvis's behavior was strange. He was in poor health, overweight, and dependent on prescription drugs, but he was also making plans for the future. He was scheduled to fly to Portland, Maine, on the night of his death to begin a new tour. He had just recently become engaged to Ginger Alden. He was talking about making new music. This doesn't sound like a man who was about to die. But there are other stories. Stories of strange late-night conversations. One of the most compelling comes from his cousin, Billy Smith. Billy and his wife, Jo, were very close to Elvis. They were with him in the early morning hours of August 16th. According to Billy, Elvis was in a reflective and philosophical mood. They talked about religion, about the afterlife, and about the book Elvis was reading, A Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus. Elvis reportedly said things that, in hindsight, seem very significant. He talked about being tired of his life as Elvis Presley. He longed for anonymity. Another key conversation was reported by Larry Geller, Elvis's hairstylist and spiritual advisor. Geller said that in his final months, Elvis was deeply unhappy with his life and his career. He felt trapped by his own image. He was tired of singing Hound Dog. He wanted to explore more spiritual music. He once told Geller, "There has to be a purpose. There has to be a reason why I was chosen to be Elvis Presley." According to Geller's book, If I Can Dream, Elvis was actively looking for a way out. He was planning to change his whole life. For believers, these conversations are not just the musings of a tired and unhealthy man. They are evidence of a plan. He wasn't talking about dying, he was talking about disappearing. When he said he was tired of being Elvis Presley, he meant it literally. He was preparing to shed his identity and start a new life. Faking his death was the only way to achieve the peace and anonymity he craved. The upcoming tour was the perfect cover. He would die just before it was set to begin, creating maximum shock and confusion. The skeptics see these conversations very differently. They see a man in crisis. A man who is physically ill, spiritually lost, and struggling with the immense pressures of his fame. His comments were a cry for help, a sign of his deep depression. He was not planning an escape. He was simply unraveling. His death, while tragic, was the predictable result of his unhealthy lifestyle and the cocktail of drugs prescribed by his doctor. The power of this theory lies in its emotional truth. It's easy to believe that a man like Elvis would want to escape. We have seen what fame can do to people. The idea that he was smart enough and strong enough to find a way out is appealing. It turns a story of weakness and self-destruction into a story of strength and self-preservation. It reframes the tragedy as a triumph. It honors the intelligent, spiritual man that Elvis's friends said he was, rather than the bloated caricature he had become in the media. But were these conversations really declarations of intent, or just the desperate words of a man who knew he was losing control? If he had a plan, why did he not seem to be making any practical preparations for a new life? And how do we separate what people truly remember from what they might have constructed after the fact, trying to make sense of a tragedy? Number 8. Why has his life insurance policy never been cashed? This is a piece of evidence that seems more concrete than a blurry photo or a reported conversation. It's about money, specifically a life insurance policy taken out by Elvis Presley with Lloyd's of London. According to some investigators, this policy has never been cashed. The claim was never filed by his estate. For believers, this is a smoking gun. Why would the estate not claim millions of dollars? The only logical reason is that the person insured is not legally dead. The story was popularized by Bill Beeney and other researchers in the 1990s. They claim to have inside information from sources at Lloyd's of London. They argue that a life insurance company will not pay out a claim without absolute proof of death. The fact that the policy remains open is, for them, proof that Elvis is alive. If he were legally dead, the money would have been collected long ago by his daughter Lisa Marie and the Elvis Presley estate. The estate is a massive, well-run business. It's not the kind of organization that would forget about a multi-million-dollar insurance policy. This theory suggests that Elvis's disappearance was a well-planned financial operation. He not only had to fake his death, but he also had to arrange his finances so that he could live comfortably in his new life. The uncashed policy is seen as a loose end, a clue that the official story is not true. It moves the conspiracy from the realm of wishful thinking into the world of hard finance and legal documents. The official explanation, or rather the lack of one, is what fuels the speculation. The Elvis Presley estate and Lloyd's of London have, for the most part, refused to comment on the matter. They cite privacy concerns. They will neither confirm nor deny the existence of such a policy or its status. This silence is interpreted by believers as a confirmation of their theory. If there was no policy, or if it had been paid out, it would be easy to say so and put the rumor to rest. The fact that they don't is seen as suspicious. However, there are other possible explanations. It's possible the policy didn't exist in the first place, or that it had lapsed due to non-payment of premiums. It's also possible that the policy had specific clauses related to death by drug overdose, which might have complicated or nullified the claim. The initial cause of death was a source of great controversy, with allegations of a cover-up regarding the role of prescription drugs. A legal battle over the insurance money might have been something the estate wanted to avoid. The life insurance theory is compelling because it seems to operate on a level of logic that other theories don't. It's not about emotion or belief, it's about following the money. In a world where every action has a financial consequence, the failure to claim millions of dollars seems like a profound and inexplicable act. It suggests that the rules we think govern the world might not apply in this case. It implies a secret so big that it's worth more than any insurance payout. But is there any real, verifiable evidence that this policy even exists? Or is it a story that has been repeated so many times that it has become accepted as fact within the believer community? If the policy is real and uncashed, could there be a mundane legal or financial reason that has nothing to do with the conspiracy? What secrets are hidden in the vaults of insurance companies, and what would it take to bring them to light? At number 7, who is the mysterious man in Argentina? The Elvis sightings are not confined to the United States. They have been reported all over the world. One of the most detailed and persistent stories comes from Argentina. It began in the late 1980s. A group of Argentinian fans became convinced that Elvis was living a quiet life in their country. They even identified a specific man. They called him the man in the gray suit. He was an American who had lived in a suburb of Buenos Aires for years. He looked like an older Elvis. He spoke English with a southern accent, and he was very private. The fans began to gather evidence. They took secret photographs of the man, they recorded his voice, they documented his movements. They claimed he used the name John Burroughs, which was a known alias that Elvis used to book hotels and flights when he wanted to avoid publicity. The man was a recluse. He rarely left his house. When he did, he was often seen wearing a gray suit. The Argentinian fans created a detailed dossier on this man. They were convinced they had found him. The story was picked up by newspapers and television shows in Argentina. It became a national sensation. In 1989, a TV crew ambushed the man on the street. They confronted him, asking if he was Elvis Presley. The man was clearly shocked and angry. He denied it, of course. He said his name was William H. Kennebrew, and he was just a retired American living abroad. He showed them his passport, but the believers were not deterred. They claimed the passport was a fake. They said his reaction was exactly how Elvis would react if his cover were blown. The story of the Argentinian Elvis is a fascinating case of collective belief. An entire community of fans became convinced of this man's identity. They supported each other's observations. They built a narrative together. For them, it made sense. Argentina was a good place to hide. It was far from the prying eyes of the American media. It was a country that had a history of providing refuge for people who wanted to disappear. Skeptics see this as a classic case of mistaken identity fueled by wishful thinking. The man, William Kennebrew, was just an unfortunate individual who happened to resemble a famous dead person. He became the focus of a local obsession. The evidence was all circumstantial. A southern accent is not unique to Elvis. John Burroughs is a common name, and many older men lead private lives. There was never any concrete proof, like a fingerprint or a DNA match, to support the claim. This sighting highlights the global reach of the Elvis myth. It shows that the desire to believe he is alive is not just an American phenomenon. Where Elvis was a global superstar. His music and his image touched people in every corner of the world. And so the sightings happen everywhere. The story also shows the human cost of these beliefs. A private citizen had his life turned upside down. He was harassed by fans and the media, all because he looked like someone else. It's a reminder that these theories are not just harmless fun. They can have real-world consequences. But what if the Argentinian fans were right? What if William Kennebrew was just another layer of the cover story? Why did he choose to live in Argentina? And if he wasn't Elvis, why did the story resonate so strongly with so many people? What does it say about our need to find our lost idols in the faces of strangers? Number 6, what did the Graceland upstairs lockdown really hide? Graceland is a museum. It's one of the most visited private homes in America. Millions of people have walked through the living room, the jungle room, and the kitchen. They have seen the cars, the gold records, and the sequin jumpsuits. But there is one part of the house that no one is allowed to see: the upstairs. Since the day Elvis died, the second floor of Graceland has been off limits to everyone except for the immediate family. The official reason is that this was Elvis's private sanctuary. The family wants to respect his privacy even in death. It's where his bedroom, his office, and his daughter Lisa Marie's bedroom were. It has been preserved exactly as he left it on August 16th, 1977. For believers, this explanation is not enough. They see the sealed off upstairs as a major piece of the conspiracy puzzle. Why such extreme secrecy? What are they hiding? The theory is simple and powerful. Elvis is still living there. Or at least he was for a time. They believe he faked his death and then simply retreated to the one place on earth where no one could bother him, his own bedroom. He could live out his days in peace and quiet, protected by his loyal family and staff. The entire Graceland tour operation, the museum, the commercialization of his image is all a front to finance his secret life. People have reported strange things at Graceland over the years. Security is extremely tight, especially around the upstairs. Some have claimed to see a figure in the upstairs window late at night, a curtain moving when no one is supposed to be there. These stories are, of course, impossible to verify. They are ghost stories, in a way. But they fuel the speculation. The idea of Elvis living secretly in his own home is deeply compelling. It has a gothic, almost romantic quality to it. It's the story of a man so famous he has to become a prisoner in his own house to find freedom. It also speaks to the deep connection between Elvis and Graceland. It was his home, his castle, his refuge from the world. The idea that he never left it is, in a way, a comforting thought. He is still there, still in his home, still the king in his castle. The family's official stance is unwavering. The upstairs is private, and it will remain that way. Lisa Marie Presley, before her death in 2023, spoke about it a few times. She said it was a sacred place, a time capsule of her childhood and her father's life. She said the preservation of it was her way of keeping his memory intact. It was an act of love and respect, not a conspiracy. But the secrecy inevitably breeds suspicion. In a world where everything is public, where celebrities live their lives on social media, the idea of a truly private space is almost alien. And when that private space is at the heart of such a public place, it demands an explanation. The locked door of the Graceland upstairs is a powerful symbol. It represents the part of the Elvis story that we can't see, the part that remains unknown. And the human mind has a tendency to fill in blank spaces with the most interesting stories it can imagine. Is the family's explanation the simple truth? Is it just about preserving the memory of a beloved father and a global icon? Or is there a secret behind that locked door that would change history? If someone were to get up there, what would they find? A perfectly preserved bedroom from 1977. Or something else entirely. Number 5. Could a man named Jesse be the real Elvis? In 2002, a book was published that presented the most detailed and elaborate Elvis is alive theory to date. The book was called The Elvis Jesse Story. It was written by a clinical psychologist named Dr. Donald R. Hinton. Hinton claimed that he had been in contact with Elvis for years. He said Elvis was living under the name Jesse. This was a tribute to his stillborn twin brother, Jesse Garon Presley. Hinton's book was not based on sightings or circumstantial evidence. It was based, he claimed, on direct communication with the man himself. According to Hinton, Elvis, now Jesse, had provided him with manuscripts, photographs, and audio tapes to prove his identity. The book includes transcripts of their conversations and reproductions of handwritten notes. In these communications, Jesse explains why he faked his death. It was a combination of things: his failing health, his disgust with the entertainment industry, and threats against his family from the mafia. He says the plan was known only to a very small circle of people, including his father and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. The proof offered in the book is extensive. There are new photos of an older man who looks like Elvis. There are detailed stories about Elvis's life that Hinton claims, only the real Elvis could know. There is a deep dive into Elvis's spiritual beliefs and his philosophical outlook on life. The book paints a picture of a man who is at peace, living a simple, spiritual life away from the spotlight. He chose Dr. Hinton to tell his story because he trusted him as a psychologist and a friend. The Jesse theory is different from other theories because it offers a complete narrative. It's not just a clue, it's an entire life story. It gives believers a name, a face, and a voice for the man they believe is still out there. Jesse is the Elvis they always wanted, wise, healthy, and free. He is no longer a tragic figure. He is a survivor. The mainstream media and the Elvis Presley estate have completely ignored Dr. Hinton and his book. They treat it as fiction. Skeptics point out that the evidence is not verifiable. The photos are blurry and inconclusive. The voice on the tapes could be an impersonator. The handwritten notes could be forgeries. There has never been any independent scientific verification of Hinton's claims. There has been no DNA tests, no fingerprint analysis, nothing that would stand up in a court of law. But for the followers of the Jesse theory, this lack of official recognition is just more proof of the cover-up. They believe the estate and the media are invested in keeping the official story alive. The Elvis brand is worth billions of dollars, and it's all based on the premise that he is dead. The Jesse story threatens that entire enterprise. Dr. Hinton has since published more books continuing the story of Jesse. He has a dedicated following who believe he is telling the truth. This theory represents the ultimate evolution of the Elvis myth. It moves beyond "is he alive" to "this is his new life." It provides a rich, detailed fantasy for those who refuse to accept the tragic ending. It's a form of collective fan fiction, perhaps. But for those inside it, it's the gospel truth. It's the final, secret chapter of the greatest story in rock and roll history. But why would Elvis choose a small-town psychologist to reveal his secret to the world? If he wanted his story told, why not use a more high-profile channel? Is Dr. Hinton a confidant, a con man, or a victim of a very elaborate hoax himself? And what would it take for the world to finally believe the story of Jesse? Number 4 was his disappearance an act of war against a criminal syndicate. This theory takes the Elvis story out of the realm of personal choice and into the world of high-stakes crime and conspiracy. It's the idea that Elvis didn't just walk away from fame. He was forced into hiding by a dangerous criminal organization. The name of this organization, according to believers, was the Fraternity. This theory was most famously promoted by the Canadian documentary filmmaker Adam Muskowitz in his 2008 film, The Elvis Conspiracy. The theory goes like this. In the 1970s, Elvis got involved in a business deal with a group of men who he thought were legitimate investors. They promised to help him finance a number of projects, including a karate-themed movie. But these men were actually members of a powerful organized crime syndicate. They were laundering money through Elvis's businesses. When Elvis found out what was happening, he was horrified. He was a patriot and a deeply moral man. He decided to go to the authorities. He became an informant for the FBI. Working undercover, he gathered information on the fraternity's illegal activities. But his position became more and more dangerous. The syndicate was ruthless. They had threatened his family. By 1977, the situation was critical. The FBI and the Justice Department decided the only way to protect their star witness was to fake his death and put him into the witness protection program. His death by heart attack was a cover story. The funeral was a sham. He was given a new identity and a new life, somewhere no one would ever think to look. This theory ties together a number of loose threads. It explains his meeting with President Nixon in 1970, where he offered to help fight crime. It explains his erratic behavior in his final years. He was under immense stress, living a double life. It explains the presence of the mysterious black helicopter at his funeral. It was his federal extraction team. It also provides a heroic motive for his disappearance. He didn't run away because he was weak or self-indulgent. He sacrificed his own identity to bring down a powerful criminal enterprise. He became a secret, unsung American hero. Skeptics argue there is absolutely no credible evidence to support this theory. The FBI files on Elvis, released to the public, show no indication that he was ever an informant. There is no official record of an organization called the Fraternity in the way the theory describes. The story, they say, is a complete fabrication, a work of fiction created to make the Elvis myth more exciting and cinematic. It's a screenplay, not a reality, but the power of the witness protection theory is that the very nature of the program means all evidence would be erased. The absence of proof becomes the proof. If he were in the program, of course the FBI would deny it. Of course, all records would be sealed or destroyed. To admit it would be to compromise the entire system and put Elvis's life in danger. So for believers, the official denials are exactly what they would expect to hear. This theory transforms Elvis from a cultural icon into a political one. It places him at the center of a battle between good and evil, between the government and the underworld. It's a much grander, more dramatic story than one of a simple celebrity burnout. It makes his, a matter of national security. Like, it's a narrative that fits perfectly with the post-Watergate, conspiracy-minded era in which it was born. But could a secret that big really be kept for so long? Would not a single retired FBI agent or Justice Department official have leaked the story by now? Is it plausible that the most recognizable man on the planet could be successfully hidden by the government for over 4 decades? Or is this just the most compelling script ever written for a movie that was never made? Number 3, did he tell us he was leaving? I'm so tired of being Elvis Presley. He said it more than once. To friends, to family, to confidants. On the surface, it's a statement of exhaustion. The complaint of a man crushed by the weight of his own legend. But what if it was more than that? What if it was a statement of intent, a warning? It's a clue. The believers argue that in the final year of his life, Elvis was not just complaining. He was testing the waters, he was preparing the people closest to him for what he was about to do. Think about the context. By 1977, Elvis was a prisoner. He couldn't go to the grocery store. He couldn't walk down the street. His life was confined to Graceland and a series of hotel rooms. His stage performances, once electrifying, had become a sad parody. He was overweight, sick, and often slurring his words. He was a proud man. The idea that he would allow the world to remember him this way seems unlikely to many of his fans. He had too much dignity for that. The theory is that faking his death was the ultimate act of taking back control. It was his way of ending the performance on his own terms. He would not let Elvis Presley die a slow, pathetic death in the public eye. Instead, he would kill off the character of Elvis and allow the man, Elvis Aaron Presley, to live. The man who loved his family, who read spiritual books, who practiced karate. He would escape the jumpsuit and the sideburns and the endlessly demanding public. His final concert was in Indianapolis on June 26, 1977. At the end of the show, he took the microphone. He thanked the audience, he thanked his band, and then he said, "We'll be back in September." Some see this as just a normal concert sign-off, but others hear something else. A strange finality. He didn't say, "See you on the next tour." He made a specific and ultimately incorrect promise. Was this a slip of the tongue or a final private joke? Then there are the stories of him giving away his possessions in his final months. He gave away cars, jewelry, and huge sums of money to friends, family, and even strangers. Was this the act of a generous but impulsive man? Or was he divesting himself of his material wealth, preparing for a new, simpler life where he wouldn't need a collection of Cadillacs? He was simplifying, cutting ties, getting ready to disappear. This theory doesn't rely on black helicopters or wax dummies. It relies on a psychological reading of the man himself. It's based on the idea that the person we saw on stage in 1977 was not the real Elvis. The real Elvis was still in there and he was planning his escape. His death was a strategic retreat, a way to preserve his true self from being destroyed by his public image. Well, it was a spiritual act as much as a physical one. Skeptics argue this is a romanticized view of a man in a tragic decline. His comments about being tired were real. His generosity was part of his character, but also perhaps a desperate attempt to buy happiness. He was a man in pain, not a man with a plan. His death was a tragedy, not a strategy. To suggest otherwise is to downplay the very real health problems and addiction issues that led to his end. But the idea is powerful. It resonates with anyone who has ever felt trapped in a job, a relationship, or a life they didn't want. The idea of being able to just walk away, to shed your old identity, and start fresh is a universal fantasy. And who would need that fantasy more than the most famous man in the world? Was his death the end of the story? Or was it the ultimate career move, the final, brilliant reinvention of Elvis Presley? Number 2, was his death the only way to become a normal person? This is the central question, the one that lies beneath all the other theories. Why would he do it? Why would a man who had everything, fame, wealth, adoration, throw it all away? The answer, according to this line of thought, is that he didn't have everything. He was missing the one thing his money could not buy: a normal life. The theory is that his fake death was not about escaping danger or making a grand statement. It was a desperate personal act to reclaim his own humanity. Imagine being Elvis in 1977. You live in a bubble, every meal is cooked for you, every door is opened for you. You are surrounded by a paid entourage that agrees with everything you say. You have no real friends, only employees and fans. You have no privacy. Every time you step outside, you are mobbed. Your life is not your own. It belongs to the public. You are not a person anymore. You are a product, an image, a brand. For a sensitive, intelligent, and spiritual man, this would be a living hell. The desire for normalcy is a powerful motivator. We see it in stories of kings who dress as peasants to walk among their people. We see it in celebrities who wear disguises to go shopping. Elvis tried to do this. He would rent out movie theaters and amusement parks in the middle of the night just to experience a few hours of normal fun. But it wasn't the same. He was always the king in his rented out kingdom. Faking his death was the only way to truly break free. It was the only way to be able to walk into a diner and order a coffee without causing a riot. It was the only way to sit on a park bench and watch the world go by. It was the only way to have a real conversation with a stranger. It was the only way to become a person again. This theory suggests that Elvis did not disappear to live a life of luxury in some hidden mansion. He disappeared to live a simple, Anonymous life. To be a husband, a father, a neighbor. To be just a man. This idea is supported by numerous accounts from people who knew him. They spoke of his loneliness, his isolation, his deep yearning for a connection to the real world. Peter Guralnick's definitive two-volume biography, Last Train to Memphis and Careless Love, paints a heartbreaking picture of a man trapped in a golden cage. He had all the material success in the world, but it brought him no peace. This is perhaps the most convincing theory of all because it's the most human. It doesn't require a complex conspiracy, it just requires an understanding of the human soul. It suggests that Elvis's death was the most radical form of self-care. He chose life, a real, authentic life, over the slow, soul-crushing death of superstardom. Skeptics would say this is pure romanticism. It's a beautiful story, but it's not based in fact. A man that famous could never truly become anonymous. Someone would recognize him eventually. The logistics of creating a new identity, of erasing your past, are nearly impossible. And would he really be willing to give up his family, his daughter, Lisa Marie, whom he adored? The price of normalcy would have been to lose everything he truly loved. But what if the price of fame was even higher? What if he reached a point where he realized that the person his daughter knew was not the real him, but the character he was forced to play? Maybe he believed that by disappearing, he was giving her a chance at a more normal life too. Is there a point where fame becomes a disease and the only cure is to disappear? Is a quiet life of anonymity a prize worth faking your own death for? Number 1, why can't we let him go? This is the final question. It is the most important one. It is not about Elvis. It is about us. After all the sightings have been debunked, after all the theories have been examined, one fact remains: the myth of the living Elvis is as strong today as it ever was. Why? Why do we need him to be alive? The answer has little to do with evidence and everything to do with what Elvis Presley represents. Elvis was more than a singer. He was a cultural explosion. He was the American dream made real. A poor boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, who became the most famous man in the world. He was handsome, talented, and charismatic. He represented youth, rebellion, and a new kind of freedom. He was the 20th century. His death in 1977 was not just the death of a celebrity. For many people, it was the death of that dream. It was the end of an era. It was the moment America's innocence seemed to finally die. His death was also ugly. It was a story of drug abuse, obesity, and squandered talent. It was a sad, pathetic end for a king, and we don't like our kings to die that way. We want them to ride off into the sunset. We want them to have a noble end. The idea that he faked his death allows us to rewrite that ending. It allows us to give him and ourselves a better story. In this new story, he is not a victim. He is a hero. He outsmarted the system. He beat the fame monster. He won. The belief in a living Elvis is a form of collective wish fulfillment. It is a refusal to accept the messy, tragic reality of his final years. It is a way of preserving the young, vibrant Elvis of the 1950s forever. The psychologist Carl Jung spoke of archetypes, universal patterns, and images that are part of the human collective unconscious. Elvis fits the archetype of the dying and resurrecting king, a figure who must disappear and then return to restore vitality to the kingdom. We keep seeing him because we need him to come back. The sightings are a modern form of folklore. They are stories we tell ourselves. They are not meant to be taken literally. They are parables about hope, survival, and the possibility of a second chance. Every time someone sees Elvis at a Burger King in Kalamazoo, they are participating in this folklore. They are keeping the myth alive. They are saying that the dream is not dead. The king is not gone. He's just hiding, waiting for the right time to return. The world has changed since 1977. It's a more cynical, more complicated place. Elvis Presley, for many, represents a simpler time, a time of hope and possibility. To believe he is still alive is to believe that some part of that time, some part of that hope is still alive too. It is an act of faith in a faithless age. It is a way of holding on to a little bit of magic in a world that often seems to have none left. So maybe the question is not, is Elvis alive? Maybe the real question is, why is it so important that he is? What does his survival say about our own desire to escape, to reinvent ourselves, to find a happy ending? Is the myth of Elvis's second life more real and more important than the fact of his death? And if he were to walk out on a stage tomorrow, alive and well, what would he even say to us? What could he possibly say that would be more powerful than the story we have already written for him.